Modern life has taught us a quiet habit. When we struggle, we look outside ourselves for the answer. We medicate discomfort. We optimize behavior. We scroll for relief. And slowly, we hand our attention away. From above, the city glows, not as streets and buildings, but as a circuit, alive with signals, running on borrowed power. Neuroscience is beginning to notice something unexpected. The brain is not broken. It is simply undercommanded. There is a switch, not chemical, not technological, but cognitive. The belief that you are in control. Watch what happens when one person pauses. The noise freezes. The notifications fall silent. A single breath enters the body, and for the first time, it is chosen. Inside the mind, the prefrontal cortex lights up. Fear quiets. Focus returns. The system wakes. Practices once called mystical are now measured, mapped, and tested. Breath, attention, stillness, ancient tools, meeting modern science, reshaping neural pathways in real time. This is not escape, it is authorship. When we stop outsourcing our agency, the strings dissolve, the brain reorganizes, connections widen, possibility expands, like galaxies forming where limits used to be. You move through the same world, but no longer as a passenger. You are directing the signal. Because the most powerful technology on Earth was never an app, or a pill, or a system. It was installed in you from the beginning. Human agency, the antidote for everything. An Esoteric Lore limited podcast series. The greatest transformation does not arrive from the future. It activates from within.
What if the greatest medicine ever discovered was not a pill? What if the most powerful therapist was not a person sitting in front of you? What if the most advanced technology for transforming the mind was already installed inside your skull? Modern society has quietly trained us to outsource our agency. Feeling anxious? Take a pill. Feeling lost? Hire a coach. Feeling overwhelmed? Download another productivity app. But modern neuroscience is revealing something ancient traditions always knew. The human brain is not just a receiver of life, it is an author of life. And the moment we stop outsourcing our agency, we begin to rewrite reality from the inside out. Welcome to Esoteric Lore, where ancient wisdom meets modern neuroscience. Today we explore a radical question. Is agency the antidote for everything? Not the shallow idea of just try harder, but the deeper scientific reality that the brain rewires itself based on who is in control. And increasingly, neuroscience is showing that when we stop outsourcing our agency and begin insourcing it through awareness, breathwork, and intention, the brain literally rebuilds itself.
Part 1. The Age of Outsourced Minds.
We live in the most technologically advanced civilization in history. And yet, something strange is happening. Rates of anxiety, depression, burnout have skyrocketed. Why? Because modern life has quietly shifted us into what psychologists call externalized control systems. We have been trained to believe my happiness comes from circumstances. My clarity comes from experts. My motivation comes from apps. This creates what psychologists call an external locus of control. And research consistently shows that people with an external locus of control experience higher levels of anxiety, lower resilience, greater learned helplessness. But those with an internal locus of control, people who believe their actions shape outcomes, show a higher level of resilience, lower stress response, a stronger executive function in the brain. In other words, agency is neurologically protective.
Part 2. The brain on agency.
Modern neuroscience has uncovered something remarkable. When a person believes they have control, the brain activates powerful networks. The prefrontal cortex, the command center for decision making, the anterior cingulate cortex, responsible for attention and cognitive control, and the dopamine reward system, which drives motivation. But when a person feels powerless, the brain shifts into survival mode. The amygdala dominates, stress hormones rise, the prefrontal cortex begins to shut down. This is why stress makes people feel mentally foggy, because neurologically, agency turns the light on in your brain.
Part 3. The illusion of outsourced solutions.
Now let's be clear. There's nothing inherently wrong with therapy, getting coaching, medicine, technology. These tools can be extremely valuable. But problems arise when they replace agency instead of restoring it. Because the brain changes depending on who is perceived as the driver of change. If the brain believes the pill fixed me, then agency stays external. But if the brain believes I participated in healing myself, the neural circuits of self-efficacy strengthen. Psychologist Albert Bandura called this phenomenon self-efficacy. And decades of research show that self-efficacy predicts life success more reliably than IQ. Why? Because people who believe they can influence outcomes actually change their behavior enough to influence said outcome.
Part 4. The science of insourcing.
Now here's where things get fascinating. Practices once considered mystical are now being studied in neuroscience labs. Breathing techniques, mindfulness meditations, focus, intention, mudras, and embodied attention. What do these practices have in common? They return the steering wheel of the mind to the individual. Studies show mindfulness training increases the prefrontal cortex's thickness, emotional regulation's capacity, connectivity between attention networks explode. In other words, mindfulness literally builds the neurological hardware of agency. And this may explain why ancient traditions across the world taught the same message. The real battlefield is inside the mind.
Part 5. The power of the pause.
There's a moment so small we rarely notice it. The space between stimulus and response. Viktor Frankl famously said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom. Modern neuroscience now confirms this, simply stating that space is where the prefrontal cortex overrides the automatic brain. It is where agency lives, and practices like mindfulness, breathwork, Kujian, meditation, all train the brain to expand that space. Because the moment we pause, we reclaim the most powerful ability a human being possesses, the ability to choose.
Part 6. Agency as the master skill.
Here is a radical idea. What if the real problem behind most struggles is not anxiety, stress, confusion, or distraction, but the loss of agency? Because once agency returns, everything else becomes trainable. Focus becomes trainable. Calm becomes trainable. Resilience becomes trainable. Even identity becomes trainable. This is why ancient warrior traditions placed enormous emphasis on mental discipline. Because the ultimate power was never physical strength. It was self-control. That's true power.
Part 7. The return of the author.
So, is agency the antidote for everything? Maybe not everything, but neuroscience strongly suggests something remarkable. The moment a person believes they are capable of influencing their mind, the brain begins to reorganize around that belief. New neural pathways form. New behaviors emerge. New possibilities appear. In a very real sense, agency is the switch that turns your brain back on. Perhaps the greatest shift happening in modern psychology is this: the realization that human beings are not merely patients. We are participants in our own transformation. The tools may help, the teachers may guide, but the real work always happens inside the nervous system. And the moment we stop outsourcing our agency, we rediscover something extraordinary. The mind was never meant to be controlled by the world. The mind was meant to shape the world. As always, I leave you with a poem, The Antidote. They told us the cure was somewhere else, in a bottle, in a book, in the voice of someone wiser than the quiet voice inside our own chest. They said power must be borrowed, that clarity must be prescribed, that courage must be downloaded from systems built by other minds. And slowly, almost politely, we handed over the keys to the only kingdom we were born to rule, our own mind. But something ancient never stopped whispering. A voice older than medicine, older than therapy, older than fear, that taught us to doubt ourselves. It said, pause, breathe, look closer, because hidden between every stimulus and every reaction is a door, and that door opens only from the inside. Neuroscience now tells us what that ancient practice in silence. The brain awakens when a human being decides to participate in their own becoming. Neurons ignite, pathways reorganize. The architecture of the self begins to be rebuilt. Not because life changed, but because you did. Agency is not force. It is not control. It is the quiet moment when awareness steps forward and says, I will choose. I will choose calm, choose attention, choose the breath that steadies the storm. And in that moment, the mind remembers something extraordinary. It was never designed to be managed by the world. It was designed to shape the world. So the antidote was never outside you, not in the pill, not in the program, not in the promise of someone else's wisdom. The antidote was the moment you realize you were never powerless. You were simply waiting to remember you are always the author. If you like this video, please subscribe, share, and give us a thumbs up. Thanks for watching. See you next time.